Abraham, according to the Bible, originates from the city of Ur of the Chaldeans in southern Mesopotamia. He was the son of Terah, descendant of Shem, son of Noah. He lived around 1800 BC. Around the age of 75, he received a call from God to leave for the corners of Canaan. Canaan was the ancient name of the region corresponding to the area of the current state of Israel. There, Abraham would form his offspring that would give rise to a great nation. In today's video you will follow. This is the story of Abraham, chapter by chapter, recorded in the book of Genesis. Chapter 12 of the book of Genesis in the Bible begins to tell the story of Abram, who would later become Abraham, and his journey of faith in response to God's call. God instructs Abram to leave his land, relatives, and home, promising to bless him and make him a great nation.
Get out of your country, from your relatives and from your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great people, and I will bless you. I will make your name famous, so that it will become a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. In you, all the families of the earth will be blessed.
Abram obeys and leaves with his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot towards the land of Canaan. The narrative highlights Abram's faith, who trusts in the divine promise, even without fully understanding God's plan. Upon arriving in Canaan, Abram builds altars to worship God, demonstrating his devotion and recognition of the divine presence on his journey. However, when they arrive in Egypt due to the famine in Canaan, Abram fears for his life and instructs Sarai to say that she is his sister to avoid problems. Sarai is taken to Pharaoh's palace, but God intervenes to protect her. Pharaoh, upon discovering the truth, rebukes Abram for his lie. This episode highlights Abram's humanity, showing that even heroes of faith can have moments of weakness and lack of confidence. However, God continues to fulfill his promises, protecting and blessing Abram and his family. This story is fundamental in the biblical narrative, as it marks the beginning of Abram's journey as the father of the nation of Israel, chosen by God to be a blessing to all nations. She also highlights the importance of faith, obedience, and trust in the divine plan, even in the face of life's uncertainties. Chapter 13 of the book of Genesis continues the narrative of Abraham's life after his departure from Egypt. Abram and his nephew Lot, who had also accompanied Abram on the journey, face challenges related to land and resources. As they both prosper in possessions, conflict arises between Abram's herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen over the scarcity of pasture. To avoid discord, Abram takes the initiative to propose an amicable separation. He gives Lot the choice of whichever direction to go, promising not to oppose his nephew's decision. Lot, when observing the lands near the Jordan Valley, chooses the fertile and well-watered region near Sodom. This choice ends up being problematic, as Sodom and Gomorrah were cities known for their immorality and sin. However, God renews his promises to Abram and encourages him, assuring him that the land would be his and his descendants. This chapter of the story highlights the generosity and humility of Abram, who, instead of pursuing his own interests, allows Lot to choose the best piece of land. Furthermore, the narrative highlights God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises, even in the face of challenges and choices that may seem harmful at the time. Throughout chapter 13, we realize the importance of trust in God and the wisdom in avoiding unnecessary conflicts. The story also sets the stage for future events, including Abraham's involvement in Lot's deliverance before Sodom came under God's judgment. Chapter 14 of the book of Genesis presents a remarkable episode in Abram's life, involving his participation in a war between several kings in the region. In this context, Lot, Abram's nephew, who had chosen to live near Sodom, is taken captive during the battle. Upon learning of Lot's kidnapping, Abram reacts promptly, organizing a troop made up of his own, trained and loyal servants, to rescue his nephew. Abram's resilience and courage are evident when he faces a considerably larger army and succeeds in freeing Lot. During this episode, Abram meets Melchizedek, a priest of the Most High God, who blesses Abram and offers bread and wine. Abram, in turn, gives Melchizedek a tenth of the spoils of war, recognizing divine blessing and protection in his victory. Chapter 14 highlights the steadfastness of Abram's faith and his willingness to act to protect and rescue his relative. Furthermore, the enigmatic figure of Melchizedek points to a higher priestly order and highlights the special relationship between Abram and God. This story contributes to building Abram's character as a man of faith and deepens the understanding of the covenant between God and Abram. By winning the battle and resisting the temptation to accept the spoils without giving glory to God, Abram demonstrates his devotion and trust in God's plan for his life. Chapter 15 of the book of Genesis is a crucial point in the narrative of Abram's life, as it highlights the confirmation and expansion of the divine promise of descent and inheritance. In this chapter, after Abram's victories in war and his encounter with Melchizedek, God communicates with Abram in a vision. Abram expresses his concern about his lack of offspring, since he does not yet have children to inherit God's promise. God responds by assuring Abram that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Furthermore, God makes a formal covenant with Abram, promising him not only numerous descendants but also possession of the land of Canaan. To seal this covenant, God performs a symbolic ritual where animals are sacrificed and their parts are arranged in a specific way. Abram witnesses a divine presence in the form of a burning torch and a smoking oven, symbolizing God's presence and approval of the covenant. Chapter 15 highlights the importance of Abram's faith, who believes in God's promises, even in the face of seemingly impossible circumstances. This faith is counted as righteousness for Abram. Furthermore, the covenant established in this chapter serves as the basis for future biblical narratives, outlining the promise of a nation and the specific land that will be an inheritance for Abram's descendants. In summary, chapter 15 emphasizes the reliability of divine promises, Abram's persevering faith, and the strength of the covenant God establishes with him. Genesis chapter 16 presents a significant episode in the story of Abram and Sarai, providing insights into the complexities of faith and trust in God. In this chapter, Sarai, who had not yet conceived a son for Abram, suggests an alternative solution to fulfill the divine promise. She offers her Egyptian servant, Hagar, as a concubine to Abram, hoping that she can bear a son who will become the promised offspring. Abram, consenting to Sarai's suggestion, has a son with Hagar named Ishmael. However, this decision generates conflicts and tensions within the family. When Hagar becomes pregnant, she begins to despise Sarai, and Sarai, in turn, treats Hagar harshly. Chapter 16 highlights the complications that arise when we try to fulfill divine promises by human means. God, however, does not fail to fulfill his original promise. Despite the choices made by Abram and Sarai, God reaffirms that the promise will be fulfilled through Sarai, who is now called Sarah. God also names Abraham's future son with Sarah as Isaac, indicating the continuity of the covenant. This part of the story highlights the consequences of trying to anticipate God's promises through human solutions, rather than confidently waiting on divine timing and methods. The narrative highlights the importance of patience and faith, even when circumstances seem to defy God's promises. Chapter 17 of Genesis is a pivotal moment in the story of Abraham, as God renews and expands his covenant with him in extraordinary ways. In this chapter, God appears to Abram, who is now 99 years old, and reaffirms the promise to make him a great nation. God adds a new element to the covenant, circumcision. Abram and all the men in his household, including his servants, are instructed to be circumcised as an outward and permanent sign of the covenant between God and Abram. Furthermore, God changes the names of Abram and Sarai, symbolizing the change in their identities in line with divine promises. Abram, father of a people, began to be called Abraham, father of many peoples. Sarah, formerly Sarai, will receive a son and become a mother of nations. During this revelation, God specifies that the son promised to Abraham and Sarah will be named Isaac, which means laughter, reflecting Abraham's initial reaction to the news that he would have a son in his old age. Chapter 17 highlights God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises, even when they seem impossible to human eyes. The institution of circumcision as a sign of the covenant is significant, reinforcing the lasting and committed nature of this special relationship between God and Abraham. In summary, chapter 17 is marked by the renewal of the covenant, the appointment of a visible sign, and the continued confirmation of divine promises to Abraham, setting the stage for the fulfillment of these promises in subsequent narratives. Chapter 18 of Genesis recounts an extraordinary encounter between Abraham and three visitors who reveal themselves to be messengers of God. This episode is notable for several reasons. When Abraham sees the visitors, he treats them with great hospitality, offering them food and rest. During the meal, it is revealed that one of the visitors is God himself, and the other two are angels. God again confirms the promise of a son to Abraham and Sarah, even when they were already advanced in age. In this chapter, God also shares his plans for Sodom and Gomorrah due to their great wickedness. Abraham, demonstrating his concern for justice, intercedes for these cities, pleading with God to spare the city if there are enough righteous people. The narrative highlights God's justice and compassion while emphasizing the importance of intercession and prayer. Abraham serves as an example of someone who approaches God with boldness and compassion, seeking to understand divine plans. Chapter 18 emphasizes not only Abraham's faithfulness and generosity, but also God's nature as the just and compassionate judge. This encounter reveals the intimate relationship between God and Abraham, strengthening the patriarch's trust in divine promises. Chapter 19 of Genesis is a continuation of the story involving Abraham, now focusing on the destruction of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. This chapter highlights divine justice and also addresses topics such as obedience, judgment, and mercy. The two angels who were with God and Abraham previously arrive in Sodom, where they are met by Lot, Abraham's nephew, who now lives there. Lot shows hospitality by inviting them into his home. However, the men of the city surround Lot's house, demanding that visitors be turned over to satisfy their evil desires. The angels reveal to Lot that God decided to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because of their great wickedness. They instruct Lot to take his family out of the city before the imminent destruction. Despite warnings, some of Lot's family are hesitant to leave the city, resulting in their loss during the catastrophe. Chapter 19 highlights the seriousness of divine justice in the face of moral corruption and highlights the importance of obedience to God's instructions. At the same time, the narrative reveals God's mercy in rescuing Lot and part of his family before destruction. This story serves as a warning about the consequences of sin and emphasizes the need to turn to God in obedience and repentance. Chapter 19 resonates as a reminder of divine justice and mercy, balancing punishment with salvation for those who seek to follow God's guidance. Chapter 20 of Genesis reports an episode in which Abraham, now living in the region of Gerar, repeats an error similar to that which occurred in Egypt in relation to Sarai, who is now called Sarah. Upon arriving in Gerar, Abraham fears for his life due to Sarah's beauty and introduces her as his sister to King Abimelech. Once again, Abimelech takes Sarah to be his wife. However, God intervenes through a dream, warning Abimelech about the true relationship between Abraham and Sarah and warning him of the imminent danger. Abimelech, when confronting Abraham, expresses his surprise and indignation at the lie. However, God, in his mercy, prevents Abimelech from sinning, revealing that the situation occurred because Abraham believed that there was no fear of God in that region. Chapter 20 highlights the fallibility of biblical characters, including Abraham, and highlights the constant divine intervention to correct and protect, even in the face of human errors. This narrative reinforces the importance of fearing God and trusting in His providence, even in the midst of challenging situations. In summary, Chapter 20 serves as a reminder that faith and trust in God are fundamental, and that despite human weaknesses, God continues to fulfill His promises and guide His people. Chapter 21 of Genesis marks the fulfillment of the divine promise of a son to Abraham and Sarah in old age. Sarah finally gives birth to Isaac, whose name means laughter, in reference to Sarah's reaction of disbelief when God announced his birth. However, joy and tension coexist in the narrative. Sarah notices the mockery of Ishmael, Abraham's eldest son, with Hagar towards Isaac. Faced with this, Sarah asks Abraham to expel Hagar and Ishmael. Abraham, initially reluctant, receives divine guidance to fulfill Sarah's request. God assures Abraham that he will also make Ishmael a great nation, fulfilling the promise made to him previously. Abraham, although worried, trusts in God's providence and provides water and food for Hagar and Ishmael before sending them away. Chapter 21 highlights the fulfillment of the divine promise, emphasizing God's faithfulness, even when the situation seemed impossible. It also addresses the complex dynamics between family members and decisions that, although difficult, are guided by God's will. The story of Ishmael and Isaac signals the beginning of the nations that descend from them, and divine intervention underscores God's sovereignty over human events. Chapter 21 serves as a reminder of the importance of trusting God, being faithful to His promises, and the way He fulfills His sovereign plan even in the face of life's complexities. Chapter 22 of Genesis is one of the most intense and significant episodes in Abraham's life. He highlights the extreme test of Abraham's faith and divine provision in moments of radical obedience. God tests Abraham by asking him to sacrifice his only son Isaac as a burnt offering on Mount Moriah. Abraham, without question, readily obeys. He and Isaac set out for the mountain, taking wood and fire with them. On the way, Isaac asks about the lack of a sacrificial lamb, and Abraham confidently responds that God will provide. On the mountain, when Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac, an angel of the Lord intervenes, preventing him from proceeding. God commends Abraham's obedience and provides a ram as an offering instead of Isaac. Abraham calls that place the Lord will provide. This chapter highlights the unshakable faith of Abraham, who trusts God even in the face of the most difficult order imaginable. Furthermore, it highlights divine provision, indicating that God never demands human sacrifices, but values obedience and trust. Chapter 22 resonates as a powerful lesson about trusting God in times of trial and understanding that God is the ultimate provider. This story also prefigures the sacrifice of Christ, the Lamb of God, who would be offered as atonement for the sins of humanity. Chapter 23 of Genesis tells the story of the death and burial of Sarah, Abraham's wife. In this chapter, we see the careful and respectful way in which Abraham deals with the issue of his wife's burial. Sarah dies in Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham, mourning the loss of his wife, searches for a suitable place to bury her. He approaches the children of Het, the local inhabitants, and asks for the possibility of purchasing property for a tomb. Ephron, one of Hate's sons, offers Abraham a cave in Machpelah, along with the surrounding countryside, as a gift. Abraham, however, insists on buying the property so that the transaction is formal and fair. He pays a fair price for the land, thus establishing a precedent of respect for local customs and a legal basis for Sarah's burial. This chapter emphasizes the importance of honoring loved ones even after death, showing Abraham's care and reverence for Sarah. The acquisition of the cave at Machpelah becomes a significant location for the future burial of Abraham and other members of his family. Chapter 23 offers perspective on the cultural practice of acquiring land for burial purposes, while simultaneously highlighting Abraham's values of respect and justice during this period of mourning. Chapter 24 of Genesis is a detailed account of the search for a suitable match for Abraham's son Isaac. This chapter is notable for the way it demonstrates divine providence in choosing a wife for Isaac, revealing important aspects of faithfulness and trust in God. Abraham instructs his oldest servant, who is not mentioned by name but often identified as Eliezer, to find a wife for Isaac among his relatives in Mesopotamia, in the city of Nahor. The servant, committed to the task, prays to God for guidance and asks for a specific sign to identify the chosen woman. Arriving in the city, the servant finds Rebekah, who generously offers water to him and his camels, fulfilling the sign requested in her prayer. Recognizing divine providence, the servant thanks God and, upon discovering that Rebekah is a relative of Abraham, seeks permission to take her as a wife for Isaac. Rebekah, after hearing about Isaac, agrees to accompany him and becomes Isaac's wife, continuing the lineage that would eventually lead to the formation of the nation of Israel. This chapter highlights the importance of prayer and trusting God when facing crucial life decisions. Furthermore, it emphasizes divine providence in guiding Abraham's servant to Rebekah, highlighting how God fulfills his promises and continues to guide the history of the chosen people. Chapter 25 of Genesis addresses final events in the life of Abraham, now elderly and widowed. He marries Keturah after Sarah's death, and children are born from their relationship. Abraham gave everything he had to Isaac, but to Ishmael and the children he had with Keturah he gave them gifts. Before his death, Abraham separated them from his son Isaac, sending them to the east, to the eastern land, leaving Isaac with his son in the land of Canaan. These then are the days of the years of the life of Abraham, who lived 175 years. And Abraham expired, dying at a good old age, old and full of days, and he was gathered to his people. And Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, a Hittite, which was opposite Mamre, the field that Abraham had bought from the children of Heth. Abraham and Sarah, his wife, are buried there. And so ends the story of Abraham, one of the greatest protagonists of biblical characters, respected and revered by the largest religions in the world. And now I want to hear from you. What important lesson did you learn from the story of Abraham? Leave it in your comment below. Share this video with your friends and subscribe to the channel.